Oh, it's already recording. All right, RJ. This is the start of this podcast, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to. Not that I know what to say, but we've been talking about shedding leaves and why this is so uncomfortable, and I don't really know what to look at, but I'm looking at my phone. But I also know that I think what we're doing is correct because it's like we're working out. But this kind of working out is really fucking awkward.
Yeah, it's like when you walk into the gym for the first time
Yes.
and you see that buff guy in the corner just ripping it with the
Yes.
shirt off.
And it makes you feel very awkward.
Yeah.
And then like we were just saying right now, a good analogy is like, oh yeah, this phone is like the fucking like the most awkward thing in the world. Like I'm talking to a girl, like you said, talking to the boss, talking to someone that you wouldn't, how did they say, that makes you the most uncomfortable thing in the room.
Yeah, you were kind of put it in the perspective of like a lens.
Yes.
Like you're always talking in front of something.
Yes. It's
And
never
then-
without it.
Yeah, so then talking to a camera this is going to be watched maybe like 10, 15 years ago, 10, 15 years from now, and you're going to be like, "Oh my god, that was
Yes.
so cringy."
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we were talking, and then what else? I'm trying to think.
Well, first, what's the
Yeah.
what's the podcast called?
This is just going to be the, I think we're just going to call it like Jug Vision.
Jug Vision.
Yeah.
Jug Vision episode 1.
Yeah, this will be Jug Vision episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what, I know what will come of it will be better ideas for our Jug stuff, because one realization is that I really don't, how did I say, I don't really care to make content, but I care about speaking about this. Like where I'm like, oh yeah, like making content seems to be like not something I'm interested in, but it seems to be the only thing that anyone ever talks about.
Yeah, I think it's like almost like our modern diary. Because if you think about it, our parents, our grandparents, they like actually wrote things down, but we are just impatient. So I personally don't like to write things down. So I personally look back at videos I've done either on Instagram or social, and I look at it as a diary. So I think podcast is like the modern diary.
Yes.
Because I don't think you care. I personally don't care if anyone listens to it. I would love to listen to this like later on though.
Yes, because the Jug World started because we did a podcast and tried to go too hard with it. and then the whole point is, like you said, we cared too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that it's like, oh, the whole point is to learn how to speak like this.
Like
as we were talking, like speaking like this is a tool for some reason, because it seems like the conversation that I need to have all the time. You know what I'm saying? For me personally, like I'm like, why am I not having this conversation in public? And why is it that you're in public all the time and I could have the same exact conversation, but when we're sitting down here, I lost all my words for no reason. For no reason.
Well, it's even more interesting because like in public, I find it fascinating that you could talk to someone and they just haven't flexed that like speaking tool, that social interaction. And it's very awkward when like you go into a coffee shop, you're just like, hey, how's it going? And they just literally look at you and look the other way because they haven't flexed that muscle in such a long time.
Yes.
Especially post-COVID.
Yeah. And then getting lost in the thoughts about how to keep something consistent, where this is the most uncomfortable thing that I want to be consistent at, because it's the fact that I know there's people like us doing the same thing, being like, okay, these people aren't any different. Why is it that I can't do this? Like in terms of like, why is this hard? Like, and I know going back to this is harder than going to the gym. It's harder than surfing. I can probably name so many things that this is harder than, but for some reason, it's like, I don't even, it's like, it's like incomprehensive to me still. Like my brain doesn't make the connection like, oh, this is the same as the pen and paper, or this is the same as like you said, the diary, the person, the like
paddle out.
the paddle out. Like it's like, oh, like why
the press, the bench press, or the rope that we do.
And why is it that I like you said, it's like, why is it that my brain can't get into this space creatively or creatively, I guess, create, and it's like, oh, like why is creating in this audio format the hardest fucking thing in the world?
Because it's being recorded. It's like being documented. Like when we do other things, no one's like documenting that surf that you did.
Yeah.
So if you suck shit for that day, you're not going. No one's going to know.
Yeah.
But then you paddle out with like your friend that has never been surfing, and he sees you catch a wave. He doesn't know like the countless times that it took you to finally catch that wave.
Yeah.
So I think that's like an interesting like way to look at it, because like no one listens to Joe Rogan's first episode. They listen to like his last episode, and they say, "Oh my God, that guy's such a good podcaster," but they had never like listened to like where he started. So I think no one's gonna actually care where we start. We just gotta be consistent.
Yes, because you're right. When you think about it, he had Anthony Bourdain on when he started, and nobody even really noticed that. Though that was in like the first under 100 episode. Now that you're talking about it, that was in that first 100. But it's funny you talk about that because you're right. There might be. I guess that's how the jug started. Was like, oh yeah, we didn't start at
what is the jug? Not to put you on the spot.
No, but the jug is gonna be what this is going to be. Like, I think the jug is going to be whatever the language that comes out of this, and whatever this is a study essentially is. Because I'm like, okay, this is me. I said even this podcast, and it's like, oh, however someone views it. For some people, it might be a podcast, and for others, might be just like, oh, this is a video where I watch two guys talk. And that's it. And that's what's even weird to think that we're already past podcast. Yeah. Because like you were mentioning, like that's a clip. It's like, okay, well. You know what I'm saying? It's like how many clips, and then you're like, and then trying to find a philosophy of like, why do I need clips? And then us talking today about shedding leaves. I'm like, oh yeah, like the natural talk. Like it's like, oh, all these clips are gonna be like growing leaves, and then like you said, they're gonna shed for newer clips, and then going back to like even what you're saying, thinking about it right now, to being like, oh, the new clips later on down the road will be like those are the new leaves, and nobody's gonna know like I said, the old clips will be there, but they're like forgotten because that's how quickly people like they possess something new, you know?
Yeah, it's always on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the shedding leaves without diving into the shedding leaves.
Yes.
So you've already explained the whole story to me, but so shedding leaves for you without going into too much detail, can you just explain it for everyone listening?
It's pretty much, I think everyone, and this goes into all the stuff you probably hear on the internet, but this is one that I'm here. This is one that I feel that you've probably heard in a TikTok, Instagram. Someone always talks about like how should I say?
The motivational
motivational quotes, all of that, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that right now. And it's like, oh yeah, the shedding of leaves is almost just like this reality of like, oh yeah, like there are dead ends to parts of my, my community of people. And there's dead end There's things where I'm like, oh, this is a dead end, and it's like, oh, it's time to like how should I say, like a leaf comes off the tree. My relationship with these leaves or these people now, it's like, oh, they've fallen off, and it's like not for bad reasons, for good reasons. It's like, oh, I'm working out on being a better me again, but it sucks to see a leaf fall down from something that was once a part of me, and then you're like, oh, these relationships, as everyone says, oh, we had a falling off. Look, I like damn, these organic things really had to fall off for me to grow better things, to simplify it.
Yeah. And you spoke about going through a funk for 3 days. So you were going through a funk because the leaves were shedding off. What brought you out of that funk? Or are you out of that funk?
No. But what's getting me back in play is the same concept as always. It's like, oh yeah, the spotter when the weight gets heavy. It's like, oh yeah, like dudes telling me to go surfing, talking about boards, being like, oh hey bro, like here I got a board for you, like let's go, like here let me take you out surfing. I took out my other friend surfing. Like it seemed like this, like I said, it's like the surfing right now because I'm from Orange County. Like surfing seems to be the one weight room where it's like, oh, a dude will always be like, oh hey, try my board out, like let's go surfing. Where I'm like, oh damn, that means a lot more to me at this like right now than it's ever have.
It's almost like your habits are your spotter.
Yes.
In life, because if you have decent habits, like anything that's positive, whether it be working out, running, the rope flow that we do, it like kind of spots you when you're going through a shitty time.
Yeah.
Because you just have to go back to the habit, and then you don't have to really think because you've already been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find myself going to that all the time. Like I have like a difficult thing going on with my mom right now.
Yeah.
And I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, I just need to stick to my habits. It's not to distract me. Like, I know the problem's there. I'm not running away from the problem. It's just to spot me when my feelings are out of check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it always equates out because someone, and I think this goes for anyone, right? When you're doing the hardest thing possible and you break down, like I was talking about this earlier today just with some coworkers. I was like, oh, hey, like you should be going as hard as you can. So when people see you and you've been doing, like I said, you're going through it. When you break down, people are going to be like, damn, that you were doing it. That's why they're there. That's why it's like, oh, because when someone just avoids it and they're not telling you what they're supposed to be telling you, but then the one person is like, oh, hey, do you need to take a break? You're like, oh shit, you were telling me the right thing. Well, everyone over here was clearly just watching, and
so break that down. So I could see it in both perspectives. I could see someone seeing you like get the jug or do your thing, and they're like, they want to say something that you're going too hard, but they think it's just your MO or like who you are.
Yeah.
So how do you make that conscious awareness of like, oh no, that person's going too hard. I probably should like give him like.
I think that it's like not like a nugget, but I think when there's an act that you can see that someone is doing that is taking the most out of them. Like, I know it sounds weird, but like even the laziest person will have an act being like, I just don't feel like doing this today. But nobody will ever ask that person why or ever sit down to hear out their thoughts of laziness, where it's like just hearing out the thoughts is better than not hearing the thoughts. Where it's like, I would rather hear the laziest person's problem to be like, hey, like, please share. You know what I'm saying? Please share, because even at your laziest, it sucks that you would call yourself lazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't
it's like that guy that you always ask to hang out. And he's always like, nah, man, I'm working.
Yeah.
Like, no, I got a shift that day.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I know you don't have 3 jobs.
Yes, exactly.
I know you're free sometime.
Exactly.
That makes sense. I do have a friend like that.
And it's like, oh, when like today there was a good conversation with someone being I was having a conversation, and what came up was that person being like, what is it? Feeling like they made a bad choice because someone else was judging their choice. Like, it's like, oh, you chose to buy X, Y, and Z because it's your lifestyle. Like, own it, because now you're living on someone else's dream and not your own. And you're only saying this, oh, there we go, irresponsible. It's like, oh, this was an irresponsible buy. I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was because that person judged you and said you were irresponsible.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you are living in someone else's dreams and thoughts. So just be. And this person was just buying a cat essentially, but I but I was just like, oh, that's what you wanted. Like, you're making your home, your house, your condo, and it's like, oh, that's you. If you felt irresponsible, it wasn't you that made you feel that way. It was that person. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you
could even dive deeper than that.
Yeah.
Because is it the person, or is it the fact that that person was not consciously trying to live in the present? So I think a lot of things stops us or makes us rethink things, because we're either thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future.
Yeah.
Because in reality, if you just think like if you just accept your decision in the present, we decided to come in here, jump on a podcast without any thought about what we're going to talk about, but we're flowing.
Yes.
Because we're not thinking about, oh, this is going to sound so stupid later on, or we tried this, it didn't work. We're just talking in the present. Yes,
and we were talking about like, oh, it's like the muscle. I'd rather keep talking and sounding stupid at this point, because clearly, like, this is everyone. In going through right now, everything you do will always be considered stupid until one day you're like, this isn't. Yeah. Like this one day, with this one day when you grow out of stupid, you're like, oh yeah, like I grew out of stupid, but I'm still stupid. And it's like, oh yeah, like I still have to be you. How should I say it? It's acknowledging that you're like, I don't know, not to say that I'm like, how did I say, when you acknowledge that you're dumb at a lot of things and that there's always someone who can show you something, you're kind of like, oh, like, it's great to be free to be that guy. Like, oh, instead of judging that person that you're watching act a certain way, why don't you could just do it. Like, it's like, oh, like, that's how I feel with this. It's like, oh, like, we're not putting on an act, but I want to act this way because I know that it's going to be a positive act. And it's funny going into this theme, right? Yeah. You watch a movie for a good act, not a bad act. You know they're acting, but you're going for a good act. And it's like, oh, this is the act that I'm like, I don't mind going through, because it's like, oh, like, This is good actions, good act. Even if some of the stuff I'm saying I still don't know what it means yet, maybe through this podcast someone will be like, hey dude, like that totally, or hey, like that I didn't get that, like maybe we can further explain that, or hey, maybe that was wrong, and I'm like, damn, maybe I got to go back and rethink these things, because like you said, it's like, even if you're writing down something I notice about this is that someone could watch it and totally cause a conflict to what you're saying that wasn't there before, because in a diary there's no conflict, where I'm like, here there might be some kind of weird conflict that I'm like, oh wow, that thought was really it really got to me. You know what I'm saying? Like it made me cry. Like
and it has nothing to do with what we're saying, but it pulled on that trigger, it pulled on that string in that person to make them think of something.
Yes.
Like music. But there was a lot to break down what you just said. The first thing was that a lot of people, we know, like after we do this, after we flex this muscle a bunch of times, like on our 100th episode, we're going to have like this consistent flow where it's not going to be so hard, and we're going to have things to talk about.
Yeah.
And then people are going to be like, oh my God, like those guys just have it easy. Like they're just outgoing guys.
Yes, because right now I feel very anxious and very, very tight and very like weird. Like I will tell you,
figure out what I'm gonna do with my body right now.
and even thinking about like what you're saying, like it's weird because it's like I said, it keeps going into this drug analogy too. And I know, well, bro, maybe this will be later on too.
Let me finish.
Go. Sorry.
Let me finish that one thought. So it's like that concept of like with our flow, you have rope, I have poi. Like we looked really stupid when we started, but now we are decent where people are asking us like how to teach them, and they said that we just look like it's natural to us, but we had a lot of practice and consistency and something we like to do. And then secondly, some of the best advice that I've ever gotten in like the weightlifting world or the gym world is by someone that was like consistently going. As soon as I started, he said, just remember that when you first step into the gym, you're forever small. You're never going to be where you want to be, and just be okay with that.
Yeah. You're
forever small. Like every time you look in the mirror, you're chasing something that's not attainable, because you're always going to want to be bigger. You're always going to want to be better. So and then if you have that concept of like, oh, I'm forever small, you don't have to like try to push yourself every time you're going in. You could concentrate on the light reps, like making sure your form's correct.
And to add to that, right? Alex Hormozi said this best, right? You have to break down a thought or emotions 1,000 times over for it to grow. Well, your muscles have to break down 1,000 times over for it to grow. You know, and it's like, and what is that 1,000 times or 10,000 hour rule? You're moving horizontally, and that's been a thing of this year too for me. Is this? And it's funny you're talking about that, but it's like, oh, you're like this.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be moving anywhere and that's thanks to Alex Hormozi. He talks about that, but it's like that
Isaac's a big Alex Hormozi fan.
Like that.
Tell everyone about your time you met him.
Oh no,
a lot of people see influential people on social media, but not everyone lives in California with the opportunity to like run into these guys. So how was your time meeting Alex?
He was really positive in all he did, because he only had a quick time to talk to me, but it was just like the main thing he said to me was just like, I was someone like, oh, working in coffee design, and like, oh, like what should I invest in? He's like, oh, just invest in your skills and traits and double down on those because they can't be taxed. And I'm like,
they can't be taxed.
I'm like, oh yeah, like. And then you look at his videos, and then you're just kind of like, you want to argue with him, but then you're like, for when you get to that point of thinking, some of it becomes very real. Like, so like when you get like you said, the rope flow seems to be our entryway. Like that was my entryway into being like, oh yeah, like I could be, the one thing I'm happy for is the thing that doesn't cost me any part of anything to do. And then like being able to do, not even just being able to use it every day and get no gains from it, and then being like one day being like, oh, I liked doing this because it didn't cost an emotion, didn't cost a thought. It was just something you naturally did, and it's hard. And it was one of those things that like we say, it's like non-tangible. You're like, you go to the gym because like you said, you're small, cool. Once you get over being small, it's like you just keep going. You just keep going. You literally keep going because you're trying to avoid your old self to be your new self. And it's like, to be your new self, you can't do any of your old things. And it's weird because it's like going and like, look, we're talking about shedding leaves. You got to shed your old self. You got to shed the skin, and it's so hard because it's like, oh yeah, how do you fight going into all this double downing investment in skills, right? If say you're working on a new project or a new skill, you can't fight old thoughts or old battles because you're already better than that. But you can't, how did they say? You can only be humble for so long until you actually are like, oh yeah, that's right. Someone told me I was good at something. Like, okay, cool. Maybe I'm that now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's weird because it comes in waves, right? For everyone, it's different.
Yeah. Cause then once you're like at that point where you're like, okay, I'm this guy, like I'm a flow artist. Then you meet the next level. You're like, shit, I'm not a flow artist. Like, there's so much more I could take this. And then you're a student again. It's like it's a constant circle for me, at least. I'm always like constantly see myself be like a student, teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher. And then I've always been chasing something new. And I think that's because I don't want to be the teacher. I always want to be the student. Yeah. Because being the teacher has its own like heartache, like its own like responsibility, and I don't know, think that person you have to be a teacher.
Yeah, because then they're expecting you to be the teacher, and then when you have to handle all their problems and all their values and all of their weight, essentially, it's like what were we talking about? It's like this kid, it's like being the parent and knowing that you're not going to give your kid something, and knowing that you have to take all of their emotions and you have to rewrite it for them and be like, okay, you gave me crying, laughing, you gave me all of this. So how can I rewrite this out to give you, like, I don't want to use like a transactional phrase, but like a product of a thought so you could clean your room. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you're giving it, like the kid is giving you all the tools possible to be like, all right, how do I give him the thought that's going to get him to clean the room? Because I got everything from that guy.
Yeah. So rough. So hard. I think we need to come up with at least like 3 or 4 names for the podcast.
Yes.
So we'll do that. Because what's the first one you had?
I had Jug Vision.
Jug Vision.
But it could also be called something else under Jug World Productions, honestly, because for right now, it could be, you know, and maybe we'll get into the Stevie Zeke saga, but like it could be the like RJ and Stevie podcast. You know,
you go by Stevie?
Yes, we're going by stage names because the whole point is like the boys over the summer when we started that podcast, I got the nickname Stevie. Okay. And pretty much all of why we're doing this.
What's it feel like to have a nickname? Feels good, right?
It does, because mine came from a predominantly it came from such a positive thing that I liked that our friends made a persona for me on how I was going out and talking to people and on the lifestyle. So I was just like, oh yeah, that's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, oh, I like all that WWE stuff once in a while. Yeah. Because it's like you say, it's like putting on the act. It's like, oh yeah, like that's something that it's like, as much of a dark trait as that is, everyone likes a good act. And
it's so funny, not to cut you off, but I think it's so funny to see, I forgot who it was, but it was a wrestler that was doing some type of speech for some type of acting award. And he was like, oh, dude, not acting, it was sports. So the wrestler was giving an award out for sports. He's like, you guys are all the same. We're all the same. Like, you guys are putting on a show. I'm putting on a show. Like, who's to tell you? Like, who are you to tell me that I'm acting? Like, I'm out there. I'm performing. Yeah. I'm getting the jug. Like, it even though it looks different, it's the same. Yeah. Yeah.
And what you're talking about, it's like, oh, like, if they made this name up for me doing stuff while we're out, it's like, oh, it's like before I would be like, no, I'm not into that. Like, no, don't give me a nickname. Just call me by Isaac. But then I'm like, oh, but it's kind of interesting because it's like, oh, I quote unquote something marketing me, right? It's like, oh, the design, fitness, all that stuff, that did all the marketing for other people to market my value to give me a nickname. And that itself made a product. And it's like, oh, it made the jug. It made quote the Stevie Zeke universe. It's like, oh, the
Stevie what?
The Stevie Zeke universe.
Stevie Zeke.
And it's so interesting because that's just like, look, that's just us being like street kids, just kicking it still and being like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, you're never too old to get a nickname either. Yeah. And it's weird because you don't think how much people appreciate when they've done something positive and then you give them a nickname for it. Even if it's done something bad, the nickname you've got, if you can have fun with it, like you said, it goes into this fucking act thing where I'm like, oh yeah, everyone loves watching an act, and you're just like, nickname.
It's your alter ego.
It's the alter ego,
Yeah.
but it's something that you can use to like even I can tell you, the Stevie Zeke era got checked pretty hard. Like in terms of like, even my brother was like, oh, like it was pretty, like I say, it's pretty. It's like, how do I say? You can get carried away with the pleasure of it too, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And look, a good analogy is your alter ego. Before you didn't have tattoos, now you have tattoos. Well, now you might not have a nickname, but you have something on your arm that now might look like a couple other guys who might also have a tattoo on their arm. And you're just kind of like, that in itself is a nickname. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? In philosophy, it's like, oh, and you're this whole new guy now. It may be at an older age, and then you're like, oh, this guy now looks like he's the Don Juan of doing whatever he wants.
Oh, it's
like,
you know, it's like me with my long hair.
Yes,
I'm a whole different person with long hair.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to grow it out.
And like, as you know, it does change things when you.
Did it shut off? No, we're good.
No.
Yeah, we're good.
It changes things because you want it to change. It's like, oh, and it's one of those, like I said, it's a dark trait to be like, hey, like, yes, when you want to lean into it, you're like, oh, it gets better. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not sitting there trying to treat yourself not nicely, but you're like you're just like, oh yeah, like, yes, this is the one thing I got to be like, you got to be empowered by, like, in terms of like I think every person
you were on a roll for a hot minute during that time, because like people were telling me like, oh man, Isaac needs to calm down. Because you would be at parties just like preaching
every time
about what you're passionate about, because the Stevie came through.
Every time. And dude, it's crazy because, like you said, it's like you talking about the hair, talking about that, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, people say don't be materialistic. Well then, okay, well then what happens when you have a material that you like? It's like, oh, I have my rope material. Like, you're gonna tell me not to like that? Like essentially, I'm a narcissist when it comes to swinging rope. But is that a bad narcissist? I don't think so. It's like, oh, I'd rather get my bad narcissism out on the rope or out on a flow art, because then it's like, oh, I'm treating myself badly as opposed to getting into a relationship with somebody and treating that person badly. Where for some reason, some people, they treat themselves badly, then they get into a relationship, then they end up treating that person because they don't have another object to like I said, catch the lightning, be like, oh yeah, you got too much energy. It needs to go into something where it's like, oh, I have negative thoughts out there. It's like, oh, and I have to do it with flow, or I have to do it with an object, or why you might go to the weight room, surfing, anything. You'd rather carry your negative thoughts to there, because at least there it just like dissipates.
It needs a release.
It needs to release, because when you hold it, exactly. Yeah. But yeah,
I like that.
We should end it there. I like that.
All right, cool.
Yeah. All right.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah.